Hey everybody, this is Minion Soldier, and this is the Piracy Show. Let's go. Now, we're going to be dealing with a question from one of the comments on a recent video by Radial Drift. Now, Radial Drift had a question for the next show. He said that basically he loves the Cutlass Black rework, but he's a little bit concerned because currently the pilot sits in the front of the ship, and he would prefer it if he could sit in the back front seat. You know, the two seats in the nose, he wants to sit in the back one. Do you think they'll allow for a pilot to sit in the rear seat as he should, like an Apache attack helicopter in, you know, basically once 3.0 and the new Cutlass Black hits? Well, I did some scouring to confirm it, but it seems like the answer is yes. I would say that yes, it is going to happen. I can't say it with 100% certainty, but I would say it's probably about a 98 to a 95% chance. I don't know how I arrived at that number, but let's just say fairly close to certain. Now, in the old Cutlass Black, of course, both seats have a joystick for flying the ship. But right now, currently, the pilot sits in the front. And when you see a lot of CIG's promotional videos, they do the same thing. They go and they hop into the front of the ship. But traditionally, in this kind of tandem cockpit configuration, the pilot is in the back and the gunner is down in the front. Now, this is a screen grab from Gamescom. This is when they were doing their Twitch shows. And DJ Knight has just dove off of a moving Nox #realism, and he has now run into a Cutlass Black to engage in battle. Now, there are both the cockpit seats, and the rear seat does in fact have a joystick. So there it is. There's the ability to control it, and one of the features that we know that is coming up in the game, I'm not sure if it is entirely 3.0 or possibly parts of it are in 3.0 and most of it later, but the ability to assign various command functions to various points on the ship. Now, chances are some of those would be usability limited, like you may not want somebody in engineering taking control of the ship's flight, unless I guess the ship was critically damaged in the cockpit but still usable. Maybe an engineer could fly it to safety, but in general, you probably would want the pilot to be at least sitting near a window. So going into the future with a system like that in place, I think it's entirely conceivable and likely that we will be able to, say, hand off gunnery to the guy in the nose and then have the pilot sitting in the back worrying more about the flight control of the ship. And you can still have one person controlling both, but the idea of handing one job off to a gunner and having the other one in the hands of the pilot makes a lot of sense, because one can concentrate a little bit more on flying, maneuvering, and being aware of their situation, especially if you have a VR helmet and you're looking all around. You can see what's going on around you. You're much more aware if anything's coming towards you, or if you're about to side slip into an asteroid, if you're circle strafing, that sort of thing. That's an advantage, and that's a cool thing to have if you're working with another person. And if you do spend a lot of time flying around with someone, you can kind of learn almost like a bit of a shorthand in communicating with each other. So the gunner knows, okay, I've just got to hit my targets. The pilot can generally see where the target is, and he can line the gunner up as best as possible while, seeing things that might not be immediately visible to the gunner. There's a serious advantage to that type of system. And we're not talking about, well, maybe not. Like, this is something that pretty much every modern attack helicopter, I think with the exception of one, which is the latest Russian one, I believe it's called the Crocodile, has a side-by-side cockpit situation for a weapons officer and a pilot, but the rest of them are all pilot sitting in the back, gunner sitting in the front. Going back a long ways, probably older than most people who watch this channel, this is the way it's done. And it's not done just because, oh, you know what would be interesting? You know what would be a new and fun thing to do? Why don't we put a gunner in the front and a pilot in the rear? I mean, no one's done that. I mean, it'll be crazy. And wow, this is like a proven system. A way of handling these two jobs and doing it effectively, giving the gunner that great forward view and giving the pilot that great overview, and handing off those two different jobs so that they can work together as a team to accomplish their goals. And this just wasn't a one-off. This is a way of doing things around the world. So you gotta kind of figure, if these guys are going out and spending billions and billions of dollars on equipment that works this way, and other people are copying it and doing it the same way, chances are there's a really good reason for it, or there's a lot of value that comes out of that people, once they adopted it, they said, you know what, we can't do without it. And they have built subsequent generations of helicopters that have continued along those lines. Now you might say, well, if that's true, then why aren't jet fighters built this way? And to a certain degree, that is correct. But the flight system that we have in Star Citizen isn't the same as an atmospheric flight system. This isn't like World War II fighters in space, you know, sort of like Star Wars. This is more 6 degrees of freedom. So that is a lot closer to a helicopter style of flying than it is to an actual jet fighter style of flying. The ability to control the lateral, the vertical, the forward, and the rearward motion of your ship, and to do so almost instantaneously in any direction, is far closer to a helicopter than it is to a jet fighter. And so that's why the attack helicopter example is a much stronger parallel than a jet fighter example. Now, of course, you know, when many people do imagine space fighters dodging and deking through trenches and chasing fighters around capital ships and flying down trenches, they're thinking of Star Wars. They're thinking of World War II fighters in space type flight sim. And I mean, a system like that can have some merit if you're willing to suspend a large chunk of reality, but I think the 6 degrees of freedom flight model is far more accurate and provides far more possibilities for the ability that, I mean, you can just decouple your ship and turn your ship and still keep flying in that original direction and fire in a totally different direction. You can do a lot of interesting things with 6 degrees of freedom that a World War II fighters in space flight model doesn't allow you to do. And that's why when you hear me or other people talking about attack helicopters, they're a far more viable example in a Star Citizen type flight model than what most people might have idealized in their head, which generally is that Star Wars-y type flight model, which really looks really good on screen. But a 6 degrees of freedom flight model just, it opens up so many more possibilities. Often in the past, you know, I've argued for this, and I've said, you know, there should be more fighters in the game that have this type of, well, there should be fighters in the game that have this type of configuration. And no, the Hurricane does not count. But, you know, I've argued for this before for these reasons. And one of the reasons that might not be immediately apparent, but I think is a really good reason for this, is the different ways that people intend to play Star Citizen. Now, let's say you're in one group of players, you own a full-on HOTAS. You've got the $600 to $1,000 HOTAS system. You're getting Rift Oculus. You've got all the kit. You've got the rudder pedals. You've got everything. You're a digital stick and rudder man, born and bred, and that's your thing. But there is kind of a problem with a lot of fighters because weapons on them are placed aesthetically rather than logically, so you tend to end up doing a lot more spraying and praying than actual hitting. And even if one or two of your guns are hitting, the other ones are generally kind of flying over, around, under the target, so you're wasting energy, generating heat, not generating a return for that. There's a lot of problems with that. But in a tandem cockpit, if you can then hand off the gunnery to someone who maybe doesn't have a stick and rudder, someone who just has a mouse and keyboard, and they can handle the shooting while you handle the flying, that can be a heck of a team up, and it can help mitigate some of the difficulties related to the aesthetic weapon placement on a lot of the fighters in Star Citizen. Wait, all of this is starting to sound a little familiar. Wait. Do you guys remember back when CIG was requesting ideas for the Buccaneer when it was being concepted? There was some asshole with a YouTube channel who suggested pretty much this for the Buccaneer. God, what a silly idea. Anyways, Radial Drift, I hope you enjoyed the video, and everybody else, I hope you enjoyed it too. And yeah, Radial Drift, thank you once again for giving me my soapbox to stand on. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.